Welcome to the Now Moment Journey podcast, and I'm your host, Kirsten Lovett, shamanic coach, tarot reader, empath. And today I'm thrilled to have as a guest Merissa Lovett, and she is a shamanic coach. She's a shamanic practitioner. She is a student of Seidr, student of Nepalese shamanism, as well as a student of curanderismo. And today we will be focusing on her experiences and anything else she wants to talk about in regards to shamanic dreaming, as well as how it relates to nature. And when I say nature, I like to kind of keep it at least somewhat centered around plant spirits or animal spirits or stone or crystal spirits, things of that nature, or elements is fine too. And sometimes that'll go into deities as well. So that's totally cool too. But before I hand over the mic to her, I wanted to just say how grateful I am that she's here. And also that, and she can introduce herself in a minute, and also I just want to kind of hand off to her just what kinds of, for our listeners and myself as well, what kinds of like either past or present things that either you did or experienced or that you now experience, what kinds of things in your shamanic dreaming life or even just in your dreaming life before you got into shamanism a lot, it doesn't matter at what stage of life you were in or are in now, what kinds of things kind of related to you, maybe connecting the dots with either plant spirits or animal spirits or even ancestral spirits, that would be totally cool too, because they relate too. So let's jump off there and I'll introduce, here's Merissa Lovett.
Hi, Kirsten. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is really fun and exciting. Shamanic dreaming for me is one of the principal ways that I do divination. So I use it for a lot of different in a lot of different areas of my life. I think the first thing that I needed to learn was the difference between a shamanic dream, a dream with my spirits, and other types of dreaming. So eventually I created a deck to kind of help myself understand this, that there were sort of like nighttime dreams that I would have where I was sort of like mulling over the day's events. And sometimes these were actually predictive dreams, telling me something I needed to pay attention to in the future. There were emotional dreams, which had to do with my processing things that were currently happening or happening in the past. And there were also dreams where spirits were showing up. And the spirits weren't always positive. Sometimes there were spirits that were negative. And I needed to learn the difference. And one of the things that was very helpful to me is that even though in my dreams I see and hear pretty clearly, I'm clairsentient, and really learning how to track what my dreams feel like was a huge step in understanding the ones that were shamanic. And then those began to branch off into learning about dreaming shamanically or animistically with the land. And my first experience of that was working with either my guardian animal spirit or a power spot, which was a place in nature very close to my house that was very like a portal for me. So yeah, that's how I got started.
Wow. Okay, cool. Because let me backtrack a little bit, because I want to try and appeal to maybe people also who aren't really familiar with this, or just don't have a lot of experience in this, or have a tough time with it. So how can you, I know you have a lot of techniques because I'm a student of yours as well. And we can always talk about that later, but what was like one of the first times that you knew, okay, I'm not having like an everyday dream about, what happened yesterday or 20 years ago. This is like, I think this might be an animal spirit, or I think this might be an ancestor. Like, what was the thing that kind of maybe it wasn't one thing, but maybe it's a set of events that happened. Like, how did you kind of get to that?
Okay, so I'll give an example about three different types of spirit energies. The first one, which is pretty common for a lot of people, who are modern people who don't grow up with a tradition, was making contact with my guardian animal spirit. Like a lot of people, I had contact with relatives who passed on in my dreams, but that wasn't the same thing as ancestral teachers. So I'm going to talk about that a little later. But guardian animal spirits, like the first time that happened to me, the way I could tell it was a shamanic dream. And I wasn't studying, I was sort of getting interested in shamanism at the time, core shamanism, but I wasn't initiated into a tradition or anything like that. Was that I had dreams about the same animal, either filling me with power so that when I woke up, I felt like very strong and I had extra energy. And that was my signal that the spirit helpers had been with me in this dream. So that was like a clairsentient experience. And also attacking me, trying to eat me, which was like kind of a nightmare. But it didn't completely feel like a nightmare. It was just hard to understand. The second experience was like an ancient ancestor who started showing up in my dreams, who just told me that this person was an ancestor, but who, like, I had no reason to think that this was an actual ancestor because I didn't know I had this ancestry. So that was like the second time. And the third time was when I started dreaming about powerful places, holy places. And eventually I started dreaming about powerful places around where I lived that weren't famous holy places. And that was my sort of introduction to, like, these are different ways that these beings can show up in dreams.
That's awesome. I love that because, you brought up something I actually thought of before we started that I thought I'd try and weave in here. And I'm glad you brought it up anyway, because you reminded me, which is the thing I love about dreaming for all of us in the 21st century is that no matter how we grew up, we don't have to worry about any kind of protocol in terms of, well, okay, maybe not protocol. We don't have to worry about any kind of cultural restrictions or prerequisites, because everybody dreams, and I mean, most people, well, I don't know, a good portion of people, I don't know if it's most, but I'd say a significant part of the population doesn't really remember their dreams. And what's cool about that possibility is that I know that from studying with you, I've seen people, I don't remember their exact names, but I know you've had people study with you who had trouble remembering their dreams. And through studying with you and practicing these ways that you do, they were able to remember their dreams better, which obviously is the first hurdle a person would need to kind of, go through, I would think, growing up in 21st century, Western culture that we're, enveloped in, is, people who are like, how am I going to shamanic dream if I can't remember them? You know what I mean? So you've done that very well. And then with your clients and stuff, and myself included. And then as you said with your examples, like, there's so many possibilities in terms of dreaming, because it's not just, maybe a divinatory thing, which is awesome. I mean, even if it was just that would be great. But it's also like, sometimes you'll find out things from your dreams that are like things about ancestors. Like you said, you mentioned, you didn't even know about this ancestor until it came to you in a dream. And I feel like dreaming, I would think, as far as like being one of the catch-all techniques or areas of exploration for people interested in shamanism or just trying to get to know their ancestors, I would think dreaming would be the most catch-all area that a person could study Um, even if it's difficult in some areas, like I have some difficulties with certain aspects of my dream life, but I've also had some amazing, really amazing, powerful dreams. They don't, you know, maybe they don't come as often as I'd like them to, but when they do come, boy, are they great, and I remember them and I try to write them down, and, I sometimes forget, but, long story short, they've helped me just like, even if I'm not at the stage as yourself, as being able to have the different levels of dreaming, because you're quite gifted at this, and you've also done this for a long time, and you've been studying this for a long time, and you've been teaching for a long time. So that helps that you have a lot of proven success track record with these techniques. But it's nice that even people like myself who, I've got some pretty powerful dreams, but maybe they don't come every night, or you have somebody else who comes to you and says, look, I can't remember anything. And, there's still hope is what I'm saying. There's still hope for a person to say, well, like I'm thinking of Joe Blow here, who maybe is like, well, why should I care about shamanic dreaming? Well, if you're remotely interested in getting to know where you came from, I think dreaming would be a great ancestral, like you said, track. Like you're very good at tracking things. But I think in a general arc way of any person, maybe coming out of corporate America, who's like, okay, I've been living this way all my life, but I know I need to change and I need to find out who my ancestors are. I would think dreaming would be a good, what do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that the really nice thing about dreaming is it's in all the spiritual traditions that I'm aware of. Like there's, Christians talk about dreaming, Islam, Judaism. So even traditions that you don't associate with like animism, even though they have their animistic side, have a spiritual tradition around dreaming that's very old. So I think it's really like part of being an adult and getting your own answers, to be able to work with your dreams. However, even if it's challenging for you, as it is challenging for me sometimes, there are tools that are not specific to a particular tradition that you can use. You just have to find the ones that work for you. So, for example, I sometimes have trouble remembering my dreams. I go through periods of time where I remember my dreams very easily, and other periods of time where I don't remember them hardly at all. And one of the things that I like to do comes from a man named James Andretti. I hope I'm saying his name right, who wrote a book called Advanced Shamanism. And he does a practice of just visualizing 3 colors in your third eye or mind's eye before you go to sleep. And that simple practice has really helped me to remember my dreams. There's another trick of like, if you're the kind of person who wakes up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or make yourself something to eat or take pills or whatever, you can use that break as a chance to once again enter the dream world after you have the break. And that's actually an indigenous technique. What they call in lucid dreaming, waking induced lucid dreaming, where people use like getting up in the middle of the night as a way to go back into the dreaming.
That's super cool. I know some people know about, and this is something I always like, if you don't mind me asking you a question about this.
Yeah.
I sometimes get these terms mixed up. Like when I hear, lucid dreaming, I kind of know what that feels like, but then I also hear hypnagogic state. And I wonder, are those kind of the same, similar or not?
Technically, they're not.
Okay.
They're different. Okay. You probably depends on who you ask. There are different ways of getting to shamanic dreaming or lucid dreaming. And lucid and shamanic dreaming are not exactly the same thing. Shamanic dreaming is basically can be lucid, but it's really dreaming where your spirit helpers are powerfully present. That's what makes it a shamanic dream for me, or an animistic dream. So, like, a person who is like in the half asleep or hypnagogic state, and I can't remember, there's two different words. One's for like when you're half asleep going into the dream, and the other one word is for when you're coming out, and I don't remember those words. But that half asleep state, that is a place where you can become aware that you're dreaming through using little tricks like noticing something about the dreamscape that changes, and then you can know you're dreaming, which is also a lucid dreaming technique. Waking up inside the dream usually is considered more like lucid dreaming, and that's where you have things called state checks, or like there's more indigenous practices. Like a lot of people are familiar with Carlos Castaneda and the tradition of when you see your hands in your dream, you'll know you're dreaming. So you're basically going in with this idea that you're entering. However, waking up inside the dream is not the only way to dream shamanically. There are people who are trained to kind of gradually go into the dream state in different traditions in such a way, either through chakras or other practices, that you're kind of going in through, like, in a more deliberate, conscious way with your spirit helpers. And so that's where hypnagogic dreaming can be actually very powerful and useful.
And that's the kind of thing that you can do like in the afternoon if you wanted to, right? Like, I mean,
Exactly.
if you're lucky enough to like be able to take a short nap, it doesn't take
Exactly.
long, what you're saying. It's not like you have to do it all night. You can like do it for like 20 minutes or whatever, right?
Right. There's a practice that Charlie Morley, the lucid dream teacher, I think he comes from Tibetan Buddhism, teaches, called a mindfulness nap, where basically you set your alarm so that you won't go to sleep. And the point is to train yourself to both listen to a sound or some sensation from your environment so you never completely go into sleep, while relaxing and letting the play of images go across your mind's eye until you gradually start seeing like the colors and the kind of, almost psychedelic looking things that people see sometimes in the hypnagogic state. And there's a reason for that. But it can be a portal to going into shamanic dreaming.
So you kind of, you kind of focus on, like, let's say you can hear a motor running outside from a fan or something, and you just kind of focus on that sound while you,
right.
Yeah.
Right. So you've set an alarm so that you can't go into like REM sleep because you don't have enough time. So like 15 or 20 minutes usually isn't enough time to go into like a really deep sleep, unless for most people. And so at the same time, you're a little bit tired or whatever. And so you keep track of that sound, let's say your motor, but at the same time you have your eyes closed. And what will happen to me usually is the first thing that goes across my eyes is some kind of like day residue. Like I've been looking at spreadsheets all day. So I see spreadsheets and they almost begin to break up, like, like one of those little funhouse mirrors that people used to, or kaleidoscopes where the images break up. And then eventually the shapes become more abstract. And then they become like colors, or like, little points of light, things like that. Now, at that point, that's when I'm most likely to go into a dream. So I have to really stay conscious and of that sound, because I will very easily go into a dream at that point.
And you've been telling me about that technique, and I'm going to set myself a goal. If I say it on camera, maybe I'll do it. I'm going to try and do that, maybe just once a week. I'm going to try and do it in the afternoon. I think it might help, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a wonderful technique. And one of the things that it does is it teaches you kind of how your signals for dreaming work. So that if you deliberately call on your spirit helpers, let's say you work with a spirit animal like tiger's your spirit animal. You can call Tiger to be with you in that mindfulness nap. You can even merge with Tiger at some point, but you might want to wait until you've gone through that period of time where all the day residue stuff has started to subside. Or maybe you play with it that you start right out with Tiger, you're riding on the back of Tiger from the get-go, that kind of thing. You just have to see what works for you. Everyone's wired a little differently.
And I'm glad, I'm going to stop you there for a second, because I wanted to bring this up anyway, because how do you feel about when people start to shamanic dream, like you're talking about, do you suggest to them, if I came to you as a client, would you suggest to me, well, okay, I don't know you, but maybe you need to look into getting a power animal before you start shamanic dreaming? Or do you say, okay, we kind of do it, we kind of get your power animal as we go along in learning how to shamanic dream? Like, does one preclude the other, or does it not really matter?
The only thing the power animal does, this is a part of your spirit body that gives you a little bit of protection. You know, you don't have to have a power animal. I mean, knowingly have one. You don't have to work that way. It's just a way of doing it. The first thing really that you need to do, I believe, is to remember your dreams. In the Maya, Ken Johnson, who writes about the Maya, wrote a great article where his Mayan teachers told him that it was actually a form of spiritual warriorship to remember your dreams. So remembering your dreams is the absolute first step of being conscious in the dreaming. After that, then being able to understand a little bit about your dreaming process is great. And then maybe after that, just being able to set up a dream, incubate a dream, where you say, my intention is I want to dream about X, and you have a dream about X. That's great. But sometimes for some people, in the course of working with their spirit helpers, whether they're ancestors, angels, it doesn't matter what they are, the spirits will send you a spontaneous, very powerful, and what I consider to be a shamanistic dream. That's a dream that's a big dream. Your spirits are with you. The energies are very clear. You may see vivid colors. You wake up with a powerful presence, of spiritual presence. Those dreams don't always have to be incubated. They can be, they can just happen. So I would say what you really want to do first is, in case you have one of those dreams, is be able to remember your dream first.
Yeah, and I'd say as you were talking, I realized, this is really interesting, because sometimes when you're kind of close to something and doing it a lot, this is why I love these conversations with yourself and Layla and such, because it's a little bit easier for me to take a step back and go, oh my God, yeah. Sometimes when you're doing these shamanic dreams, you can get answers that are like, or even potential questions that you haven't considered answering about your life or your direction. When people are worried about, or maybe they're not worried, but they're confused about their life purpose, or maybe they just feel kind of aimless in life and want direction that feels really authentic to themselves, and are kind of new to, or beginning, or even if they're not beginning, some people are very advanced and still need a lot, myself included, need help in, okay, I've done this stuff now. What am I supposed to do with this stuff? Or how am I supposed to, I've got 2 or 3 things going on here. Which ones are the important ones right now? There's all sorts of things, that you can ask of the spirit world. And I'm making it sound like it's a fairy tale, candy cane gumdrop land, and it's not. But I think it's got layers of it that have the potential to be very comforting and powerful and life affirming. But like you said, there's like some basic things first, like you want to make sure you're remembering your dream, and you want to make sure the journaling is a big part of it too. And I think some of the mindfulness nap, and there's like so many other techniques that you've taught in, I want to mention this before we kind of end today, in your Dreaming in the 9 Worlds class, which I've been studying with you for a while. And I mean, I have a lot to learn, because there's a whole kind of pantheon, maybe that's not the right word, but there's a whole cosmology kind of enveloped with your class. So there's a little bit of, learning there. But I think the practicing of it is the thing that I love doing, after learning from you as well about the Nordic, I almost said Norther's on my mind. For those of you who know who Norther is. But the Nordic cosmology and the group of deities and helping spirits and runes and various things that are very full of energy and life and are in the present with us right now, and have that ability to connect with us through dreams. Now, there's other ways they can connect with us. I'm plenty of times that's something I'm a little more comfortable with, the waking life connectedness, because I tend to, it's just how I roll. But there's plenty of people who, you know, they only get their stuff in dreams. And I know those people, and they're extremely powerful, specific, and I get it, because I know what that specificity is about. It's a very, and you can tell who's the deity, or, okay, this was an ancestor, or this maybe was, I know this was an ancestor related to that actual relative that I remembered, or this is an animal that I associate with a certain group of people, or a geographical location. Or it could be an ancestor from right outside my door, who, if I don't live on the, I'm not from the place I was born, where I live right now is not where I'm from, etc., which is, I think, how most people are. So all of this can be enveloped in your wonderful course. And I just want to make sure people knew that was happening. And I think you're going to continue teaching it. Is that right?
Yes, I am. And I'm very much looking forward to next year. Thank you so much for mentioning it. I think that one of the things that's important to me, I guess maybe two or three things, besides making sure that people can remember their dreams, and also making sure that if you're going to do shamanic dreaming or animistic dreaming, there really should be some kind of relationship with a spirit helper of some kind. And you can be that can be anything, as long as it's a spirit helper. I think the other thing that's important to me, I guess two things are what to do with information that comes to you in the dream where things are not great, where things are troubled, people who need help. Sometimes people who passed on who need help, or the land needs help, or something like that needs to be changed. That's one thing. And then the second thing that's important to me is, if you're going to work in an animistic cosmology, the other world, the dream world, has a landscape. And in shamanism, that's usually something called the world tree or the world mountain. And there are different worlds. Like sometimes people will talk about the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world. And in cultures, they have sort of different jobs, but it's basically just a way of knowing where you are in the dream and why you're there and what you're doing. And I think that that's a really important part of interpretation. It can be helpful. Now, other times, the dreaming is really more about you're connecting with powerful spirit helpers from this or that tradition, because you're supposed to do work with that, connect with that in some way. So that can also be an invitation that happens through dreams. But on the basic level, knowing where you are in the spirit world means that these places feel differently, they look different, they sound different beings live there, and different kinds of work can be done there. And because of that, it makes the dreaming a little bit more of a diagnosis or a divination, rather than just, I'm having a dream and I don't know what kind of dream I'm having, because it's complicated, So in that sense, I really like that about, and also working with the world tree in the Germanic traditions. It's surprising how much information there is about dreaming, because some of those cultures, like the people from Iceland, actually held on to some of their dreaming traditions, and there's a little bit of information there. So it's not it's not as like, okay, you're from the West, or your ancestors from Northern Europe, or you follow a Northern European tradition, and it's what they call a broken tradition, which means that it's not like It's not like indigenous people where it's been going on for like thousands of years or hundreds of years or whatever. And well, so you just have to make everything up. It's not like that. You don't have to make everything up. Everything isn't, the ancestors passed down some things to us. And so a lot of what I try to do with dreaming in the 9 worlds is to not just help people do ritual work based on dreams or to understand how the different areas of the 9 worlds relate to everyday life and nature, but also to help people understand a little bit about where they are in the dream world and why they're dreaming what they're dreaming.
That's huge. Like I really grabbed on to what you were saying about where, why, and what in your dreams. Like, why are you there? You know, where are you in the dreaming world? And what are you, you know, what's the well, maybe not the purpose, but what's happening, you know? And I mean, that just, I think that makes it really accessible to everybody, you know, because I think everybody wants to know. I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't want to know that, you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, without getting too much in this, maybe we can get into this next time. I'd love to have you back and talk more about some areas. Maybe we could focus in on, I think when you mentioned problematic dreams, I thought maybe it would be interesting to talk a little bit about the different ways that those can kind of morph and transform into something problem solving that's quite positive. You know, it's not fun to go through, but it's a lot less troublesome to go through it with somebody like yourself who knows what they're doing, coaching, you know, somebody like, you know, a client, saying, okay, this is why this is happening. Okay, I'm interpreting this as such and such. And I wanted to bring that up as a possible, you know, topic, if you're open to that. I mean, there's a couple other things we could talk about, but I do want to mention, because there's so much stuff floating around the internet, and it's, it can be very confusing and I think shut people down who are from the West and of European background in some way, shape, or form, Caucasian, let's say, or even let's say they are somebody who is maybe from a multiple, like different, you know, a mixed variety of backgrounds, and they just grew up in a very Western, you know, urban kind of suburban, you know, 21st century kind of, you know, like I did and you did. And they just think, well, I don't have any right to do this sort of thing. I don't have the right to do it. And that's so not true. I want to, you know, I'll probably say this again. So if this bothers anybody, let me know, because I can rephrase it a different way. There's plenty of ways I can say it. You deserve to connect with the spirit world in a positive, loving, supportive way. And right now, I think more than ever, we need it really badly. So, and even if it's from a broken tradition, you know, all that means is, like you said, it didn't have continual employees on the payroll. Okay. So the payroll got lost, the HR department got canceled, and, you know, there hasn't been anybody working at that, you know, factory for at least 1,000 years. Does that mean that it never happened? Of course not. It happened for like a long time. There were employees. I shouldn't use the word employees, but I just thought that was a good analogy. They because we, all of us in pre-Christian, let's say 300-400 AD, going back further from that, we all practice some kind of animistic connection with our ancestors, with the land, and no matter where we were from. It's just some cultures didn't get cut off as early as we did. So, and I was reminded of this from somebody else's presentation that I was watching today, so it's a little fresh on my mind. So it was nice to hear somebody else say it too. So, and you, since you said it too, I thought, well, I've had 2 people bring this up before I ever opened my mouth, so I'm going to say it too. So yeah, because it's a big thing. There's a lot of stuff out there. saying, you don't have the right to do this. Well, yeah, you do. Now there's things you might want to learn before you kind of jump in, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it. There's a big difference between you can't do something because you have no right, and you might need to learn a few things before you start doing something. Those are two
I
different
agree.
things. Yeah.
I think that some traditions are closed, and they're closed for reasons that have to do with protection, both for the participants and for this tradition itself. And sometimes traditions open and they close, because they're dynamic things, because they have to do with connecting with the spirits. But I think the idea that we are all hardwired to have a relationship with not just the land and each other, but with the spirits is just such an obvious part of being a human being, that it's one of the things I really love about core shamanism. I know Michael Harner gets a bad rap, and I understand why, but I think he was really good at putting across the idea that, yeah, anyone can do this, and you just need to learn how to do it in a way that's safe, And I think that there's a way that has to do with animism and dreaming that's sort of the corollary to all the journeying work that Harner introduced, although he does talk about interacting with the land and with dreams also. But I don't think that's helpful for people to say you have no right, because people know that they do. What they need to have is like a protocol so that you don't interfere with someone else's right to have a tradition and to do what they need to do. So, I mean, in that sense, yeah, that's helpful. But I mean, it's silly to say that you don't have a right, because that's not true.
And I just don't want people to get, there's a difference between what's going on in the world today with land grabbing, and of course that's been going on for a long time, versus personal sovereignty in terms of spiritual growth and personal growth, and to confuse the two is I think a mistake to do that. That's why I brought that up. But I also wanted to tag on to something that you were saying, which is when you said that we as human beings, I'm paraphrasing, are hardwired to have a relationship with the spirits and the land and I hope I said that correctly. And the reason I brought that up is because Merissa had a wonderful, if you go to her Instagram, which is at celestial_tree, which I'll put in the notes. She had a recent video there, I think, where you brought that up too, right? Yeah, about the hardwiring aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, I was basically trying to talk about this may be sort of abstract, but when people have a tradition, what they're sort of getting out of that tradition, even if they didn't grow up with it. And how no matter what, whether you have a tradition or not, eventually you have to make that work with your own ancestors and the land that you're on, and that there are safe ways to do that. Yeah.
Amen. I mean, aho. Skull. I mean, I'll just pick a word. Skull. Sante. Whatever the word what's the word of the day?
Yeah. And I just wanted to follow up on one thing you said, which is that we're lucky, and I think more and more scholars are noticing this, that a lot of things did survive, let's say in Europe, through folklore and through Christianity. They got even in all parts of the world, there's a lot of saints out there that the Catholic Church never heard of, because they're old deities that got turned into saints. That's just one tiny little example. Or there are saints that the Catholic Church does recognize, but they've been turned into various things. There's a saint, I can't pronounce his name, if it's Cipriano or Cipriano, but he's like a saint that's associated with San Pedro cactus.
Oh yeah. So, well, I remembered learning that Saint Peter, but maybe it's Cipriano too. I'm not sure, but yeah.
Yeah, Saint San Pedro, the way it was explained to me by a Peruvian, and I don't know if this is true or not, is that Saint Peter holds the keys to the kingdom, And the Wachuma plant, the cactus, holds the keys to the kingdom for that group of people. So that's where the name comes from, which I thought was
Yeah.
really
Well,
cool.
I didn't know about the Cipriano thing. I'm going to want to look into that because I didn't realize that. That's cool.
There are people who have little statues that are in that tradition, that it's part of the various artifacts, ritual objects that go with that tradition.
And that's the
I know
North.
very little about it, so I'm that's probably not a good example. But I mean, like, Bridget, people can't make up their mind. Was she a person? Was she a deity? No one can make up their mind.
Yeah, but like getting back to Peru, I think that was the the North Coast, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
North, yeah.
Northern end of tends to be associated more with what, although they use Wachuma all the way up and down, all through Peru, as we know. But and also to talk about Bridget, I know if I had to weigh in on Bridget, I'd say she was a deity and a person, but she was a deity first, and then the person came along. That's just my gut talking, but there's always some scholar that's going to like say, no, she never existed, whatever, I don't know. This is the thing I wanted to tell you, or I wanted to bring up, is that there's a lot of, because of the way we think and the way we've been trained to think over the last God knows how many years, especially with academia, we have to have written evidence for everything and scholarly evidence. And the nice thing about scholarly evidence now is that there is a significant amount of academics trying to bring in the ritual aspect of things and make sure that you have a much more, let's say, well-rounded representation of what really, we don't know what exactly happened, but a better idea of what happened versus, okay, here's a bunch of bones, here's what we think they are. Well, okay, that's one thing, but there's some people, like you said, with folklore being, I think folklore for Europeans and Northern Europeans and UK and, and Iceland and all those people, I consider folklore like, I don't want to use the word Bible, but like as, like an academic Bible. I mean, and it's because it's better than that because it's living. And if you can, obviously there's some difficulty and finesse and kind of investigation involved in trying to find maybe depending on what you're looking for, like if you're looking for Scandinavian things, you may have to go through a lens of somebody in Denmark or something like that, or somebody in the UK. But then you got to tie that into, well, where did those people from Scandinavia migrate to? A lot of them did migrate to the UK and to Scotland and to Ireland. And, and sometimes there will be a mixture of, like, for example, you and I talk all the time about Yorkshire and that northeast coast of England. Well, that was, as I've learned from you as well, that was a major port for the Vikings, right? So yeah, it's English and it's very old because I think not far from there would be, what am I thinking of? The 8,000-year-old deer place. Not Scarabray. Sorry, it's escaping me. It's the place with the reindeer bones, the deer bones. What am I thinking of?
I'm sorry. It's skipped my
I drew a
mind.
blank. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was getting off on a tangent, but this does relate it to animal spirits because this is the time of year when I think about deer all the time, and I know you do too. But it's like layers. There's something there from 8,000 years ago in the northeast coast of England. Then maybe you have some Neolithic stuff, and then you have their reverence, and then okay, it's hard to like prove what happened, but we have plenty of people in archaeology who can help us with that. Then you get a little more, more recent. We have maybe like when the Vikings or before the Vikings came over, we might have some material from maybe the Anglo-Saxons or something. Then you have, when the Vikings come in and you'll be able to see from the islands, it's like, that's all for me. That's academia. That's real academia. That's like, and that's just as important as if somebody says, well, unless you have a living person right now in 2023 at the time of this recording who's been practicing the same exact way for 2,000 years. It doesn't, screw that. That's not.
That's a fantasy. That doesn't really exist. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess what you're saying reminded me of two things. The first thing is, I think that place is Star Car that you're
Star
thinking
Car.
of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
God.
But like,
Sorry.
everything changes. I mean, there are people who say that the Sundance, which is a super important Lakota ceremony, has changed over time. There are people who or might have even been some other ceremony a couple hundred years ago. There are people who say that, like, there's archaeological evidence that Coyoriti, which is like a super important Andean festival, was celebrated in a slightly different place during the Inca period. Nothing stays the same. And that's because the relationship with the spirits is dynamic, like the relationship with a person. And on the flip side of it, if people care about something, to hang on to it, like the people who will maybe leave, I think I remember it was like maybe a little bit of hay on a rock after they do the hay harvest in certain parts of the United Kingdom, like just some little simple offering like that. Like, who cares what their religion is? I mean, they've hung on to this for some reason because they think it works. And that's, to me, just as powerful as hoping that we could time travel 3,000 years ago and find out what the ancestors of the Druids were doing or whatever. Like it just, yeah.
And I'll give you something bizarre that kind of relates to that too. I was watching a movie yesterday on Netflix. I won't tell you what the name of it was, but it took place in Scotland. And I know for a fact that they did this, so I know they're not making it up, but it was supposed to be a holy well. And they said that they had put, like, I don't want to say trinkets, but it was some kind of jewelry, almost like a charm, like that you would, it's an offering is what it is to the holy well. And I know for a fact, because I've read bits and pieces of papers in academia about it, I know it's happened. And so sometimes stuff we see in a Hollywood movie or a Netflix movie, there's a little bit of truth to it. So, I mean, yeah, you don't want to say everything's historically accurate. Of course not. It's a movie. But I mean, you don't want to blow it off either, because that's actually true, especially the Celts. I know the Celts did that. But I know it also carried on even through, for those of you interested in Scotland, Merissa introduced me to Alexander Carmichael's Carmina Gadelica. And that's, that was when they compiled all the folklore from, I think it was from the Highlands, but it might have been a little bit of lowlands too. But, and of course, Christianity is rampant throughout it, but you can really feel when you read, I still read some of the poems, especially the ones about house protection. In fact, I might do that because it's that time of year when it's a good idea to do that. And they're quite, even if you have to say, if you're not used to praying to Mary and Jesus and all that stuff, you just substitute whatever represents them in your group of people that you worship. And it's not that I'm anti-Christian. That's not, I respect Jesus, and I have love for Jesus, but I'm not a practicing Christian every day. Doesn't mean that I am not, you know what I'm saying? I like Jesus's teachings is what I'm saying, but he's not my go-to guy. But I do know that what they mean by, in Mary and Jesus, they usually probably mean some kind of female and male. If you were in the Nordic, maybe be Odin and Freya or Odin and Frigg or something like that. I'm just kind of putting things out there. It's probably varying levels of different deities depending on what the poem is talking about, or the charm. It's really a charm is what it is. So and
there
like,
are charms and things from, I think Iceland is one place that you can actually sigils, especially, that can be used for dreaming. There are you can make your own charms for dreaming. Or, if you are in other traditions that are not Northern European, it's very common to have what Michael Harner called a power song. And you can make one of those for dreaming and ask your spirits to give you one of those. So, I mean, these things are, and there's a relationship with them. Like they may be fed in a certain way or stuff like that. So these things that are, that come down from the folklore or from even the traditions are still applicable today, even if they were being used in a very different way 1,000 years ago. Like you only use this one on summer solstice, or you only do this when you want to dream about where your cattle went off to, if your cattle got lost or something. Like it's not like you only use it for that. They can be adapted now to our needs in the 21st century.
And then maybe we can talk about that next time too, because I remembered before we started talking, I thought, oh, I want to make sure I talk about sigils, but and charms and such. And I thought maybe we could talk about that too, if because I know that's a big part of what you do too. And I've actually started doing that as well. And that's become a very prominent part of my life in the last year, ever since I've started studying with your Dreaming in the Nine Worlds class. And I've really taken to it quite a bit. I have them under my pillow all the time, like every night, and I probably need to replace them because they're getting kind of old, but they need to be refreshed every once in a while because they're living things like everybody else. These things, they need to be, revived, so to speak. Replenished is a better word than revived, because they're already revived because we're living with them, but replenished, I guess. So did you have anything else you wanted to say before we wrap it up?
No, just that this Thursday we're going to be doing the final class of Dreaming in the Nine Worlds for this year, for 2023. And we'll be working with the spirits that are in Asgard or Osgard, that are Odin, and some of the other ones, Frigg, some of those ones. So I'll if you're interested, please check out the Celestial Tree Instagram or Facebook, and there's more information there. And I just want to say thank you for a really wonderful conversation. It's always great to talk about these things.
Thank you. And I do want to mention, I just really appreciate you coming and talking. You're so wise, and I love talking with you too. So it's a lot of fun. And I just like the things that came up too. The very organic kind of way of doing this. And there's so many facets to this area that we're doing right now that, people could pretty much talk all day about it, and you wouldn't cover everything, it'd be like, oh yeah, there's this other thing. But before we go, I just want to mention, thank you so much, Merissa. And also, Merissa and I both have a Patreon called Shamanic Earth Medicine. And for you can join as little as $1 a month, and you get a free video training, usually from both of us, at least one video per month. $5 a month, you get that plus a attendance at a Zoom ceremony. We alternate, each of us, 1 month, one of us does it, and the next month, another one. And they vary. Sometimes they're fire ceremonies or shamanic journeys. There's a whole variety of different kinds of ceremonies that we do. And that's a really, really important thing, because we need some way of coming together as a community right now and always. We've always needed it since time began. We've always needed community. And this is a really great way to do it. And then for $15 a month, you can get those things plus a shamanic divination from either one of us, which can take different forms, either a tarot reading or some kind of divination type thing. And then also with that, at that price point, Merissa lets you into is that correct? And is that still okay? I don't want to say the wrong thing. You get into you get into the Dreaming in the Nine Worlds class, all for the $15 price. So you get the class, you get the divination, you get the ceremony, and you get the video. So, and that's at www.patreon.com/Shamanic shamanic earth medicine. No, and I'll put all this stuff in the show notes and whatnot and the description so you can see it. And I'll put Merissa's link for her class as well as her Instagram and Facebook accounts. So thank you so much. And we'll make sure we talk about sigils. Am I saying that right? Sigils, and maybe problematic dreams and how to like navigate those. And if anything else comes up in between now and then, maybe we can that would be really cool. Maybe I'll get a question from somebody, and if they have a specific question about shamanic dreaming. But I hope to have you come back. So
thank you. Thank you
all
so
right,
much.
thanks a lot. All right, have a good one. Blessings, everybody.